Hello, I'm Taylor Morrison, 28 years old, and if you're enjoying this story, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button for more compelling tales. Now, let me tell you about something rather extraordinary that happened to me. I attended my own memorial service, which is quite an unusual experience, I must say. I was the genuinely detested, legitimate daughter of the Morrison family. After being cast out from our Chicago home, I traveled to Colorado to clear my mind with some skiing. However, I found myself caught in an avalanche incident. When news reached Chicago, my family members wept bitterly, each one filled with regret and remorse. The adopted daughter's true nature was finally exposed, and the family forced her to make amends for the wrongs done to me. Suddenly, everyone claimed to love me dearly. They even organized a beautiful memorial service in my honor. The only problem was, I was still very much alive. This created quite an awkward situation, I must admit. Some people seem to have a peculiar fascination with the deceased. When I was alive and well, my mother, Lisa Morrison, called me an ungrateful wretch. My father, Richard Morrison, slapped me across the face. My brother, Austin Morrison, told me to get lost. And my fiancé, Derek Ashford, actively helped the adopted daughter frame me. But once they believed I was dead, their attitudes changed dramatically. Of course, I was still perfectly alive, but they were convinced otherwise. The skiing location where I went had indeed experienced a terrible accident, but I had gotten cold feet at the last moment and decided not to ski. Instead, I simply bought an overpriced cup of coffee for $15, took some photos for social media, and left. I was completely unharmed, but my family believed I had perished in the disaster. Before leaving, I had taken the GPS tracking device my family had forced me to wear, along with that disgustingly expensive cup of coffee, and threw both into the snowy mountainside. Then I turned around and walked away with newfound freedom. By the time I came to my senses, the Morrison family back in Chicago had already begun arrangements for my memorial service. Admittedly, I had not contacted them due to our strained relationship. When they originally installed that GPS tracking device on me, it was solely to monitor whether I had the audacity to come within 300 yards of their adopted daughter. After all, they had already banished me, and before my departure, my parents had spoken harsh words, saying they would rather not have me as their daughter at all. They declared that my best outcome would have been to die immediately after being switched by the adopted daughter's biological mother and abandoned outside. They believed this world should never have witnessed the existence of such a vain and malicious ingrate as myself. In their perspective, I had merely been punished by being locked in the basement for 3 days, causing me to miss the SAT exam that could have changed my destiny, while their precious adopted daughter had cried all night before the exam because of my supposed interference. They were convinced I had done it intentionally. From their viewpoint, from the moment I returned home, I had used every conceivable method to target the adopted daughter. Now, they could no longer tolerate it. People like me, they felt, made them uncomfortable just by breathing the same air. Consequently, they sent me abroad, and now they believed I was dead. When I stumbled across the obituary my own brother had posted on Instagram, I could hardly believe it. Frankly, I thought the post contained more elements of a curse than genuine mourning, so I chose to ignore it. I immediately deactivated my phone number, Instagram, Facebook, and all other social media accounts, preparing to embark on a healing journey free from my prejudiced family members. This was something I had wanted to do for quite some time. In my original plan, I would have already changed my fate through the SAT examination, moved far away from the Morrison family, and finally begun my happy life. Fortunately, the current outcome was not entirely different. At least I would never have to see those 4 faces again. Before this trip abroad, I had already deregistered all information related to my social security number. I had no intention of returning, as the $1 million my father had given me when he told me to leave was sufficient for me to find a good university abroad and start fresh. From the moment I departed, Taylor Morrison had ceased to exist in this world. I just never expected that within merely half a month, they would have organized a complete memorial service for me. The invitation was sent to my only close friend's phone. She excitedly insisted I must return to witness this spectacular drama. "You've supposedly kicked the bucket and left, but Brooke is in deep trouble now," my best friend said, her face barely containing her gleeful expression. She continued, "Brooke had no idea about the Avalanche incident. After you left, she kept falsely accusing you, claiming you were sending her threatening text messages from fake accounts. Your father was initially furious and said you were truly incorrigible even in death. But when he checked the timestamp of those messages, they were sent after the avalanche occurred." His expression changed instantly. "What happened next?" I asked. At that moment, I was soaking in a hot spring at a Napa Valley winery, and upon hearing her words, I opened the home surveillance video feed on my phone. Indeed, though I had left, my surveillance system remained operational. Initially, when Brooke was framing me so extensively, I became increasingly angry and found opportunities to secretly install monitoring equipment throughout the house. Unfortunately, just as I had completed the entire installation, I was forced to leave. At that moment, no Morrison family members were home, so there was nothing to observe. My friend Paige Sullivan's voice continued. "Then your father naturally tried to defend Brooke. He thought she had made a mistake and kept asking her to confirm whether there had been some misunderstanding. As a result, Brooke resorted to her classic strategy," my friend said, imitating her affected voice over the phone. "Daddy, please don't blame Taylor. I'm sure she didn't mean it. She's just angry about being sent away, which is why she's acting this way. There must be some misunderstanding." In the past, this technique of Brooke's was almost foolproof. Typically, halfway through her performance, the elegant and refined Lisa Morrison would tearfully embrace her while simultaneously developing resentment toward me, feeling both heartbroken by Brooke's understanding nature and hatred for my supposed actions. Yes, she harbored resentment toward her own biological daughter. From the moment I was brought back, she began resenting me, as my appearance had shattered what seemed to be her perfectly happy family. There was also my father, who, after Brooke's accusations against me, would subject me to what he called education from this man who had never been a responsible parent for even a single day. Beatings and forced kneeling were routine occurrences, and these punishments extended beyond our home. At school, my own brother Austin Morrison would defend his beloved Brooke. I lived with the Morrison family for 8 years, from age 10 when they found me until 18 when I was expelled from home. During those 8 years, I never experienced a single peaceful night's sleep. Brooke would mysteriously suffer injuries or accidentally consume foods that triggered severe allergic reactions, causing her to become unconscious and requiring emergency hospitalization. When she awakened, she would explain the incidents to the Morrison family in this manner. She would say, "I don't blame Taylor. She's just feeling too insecure, which is why she resents me so much. Daddy and Mommy, you must pay more attention to her." I certainly received their attention. The Morrison family had a basement punishment room exclusively for me, which was much larger than the guest room I occupied. I suffered from claustrophobia because during the period when I was switched as a child, the nanny had locked me in a suitcase without food or water, occasionally allowing me brief moments to breathe through a small opening. I was confined this way for 3 entire days until I was taken far from Chicago and abandoned in the wilderness, just as the Morrison family began to lose hope and accept the baby girl who had been mistakenly placed with them. I spent most of my teenage years in that basement. The The cramped darkness created heart-trembling fear that seemed to crush all my internal organs. Eventually, I developed severe neurasthenia and sleep disorders, never again able to enjoy a good night's rest. Even when I could fall asleep, I was frequently awakened by the enraged Richard Morrison, who would drag me to kneel outside Brooke's bedroom door all night as penance, even when I had not been present during some of Brooke's incidents. Once a person's reputation becomes tarnished, they will be blamed even when they are not present. But what if they are not even on Earth? That situation becomes rather complicated. According to reports, that evening, Richard Morrison became so angry that he smashed his phone directly in front of Brooke. I spent considerable time reviewing video footage to find this scene, with the image frozen on Brooke's surprisingly comical expression of shock. She had hoped that the offensive messages on the phone screen would make the Morrison parents completely give up on me. Instead, she received Richard Morrison's first display of anger directed at her. Brooke was so frightened that she began crying helplessly on the spot. Austin Morrison, protective of his sister, rushed out to confront their father and received a resounding slap from Richard Morrison. The sound was quite loud. From the moment I returned to this family, I had always served as the common enemy for those four people. The Morrison family members were remarkably united in their solidarity. Austin Morrison had never been treated this way by Richard Morrison before. The young man bristled like a lion, his eyes red with fury as he glared at his father with hatred. It was precisely this expression from Austin Morrison that made Richard Morrison suddenly realize something significant. Previously, they had all looked at me with this same hateful expression. Now, the conflict had shifted between Richard Morrison and Austin Morrison. Faced with his most beloved son and daughter, he refrained from further violence. However, he began to harbor suspicions about Brooke. Richard Morrison pulled Austin Morrison into his study, solemnly showing him news footage of the Avalanche. This accident was described as the most catastrophic in the mountain range's 100-year history, with countless skiers perishing on the spot. Austin Morrison's reaction was one of complete disdain. He was at that impulsive, passionate age when it was easy to manipulate him, when loving someone or hating someone came naturally. He loved Brooke, who had grown up alongside him from childhood. Naturally, he hated me, who seemed incompatible with them after being brought home, and who allegedly bullied and framed Brooke constantly. He believed this was merely another scheme I had devised to force my way back home. This led to Austin Morrison's Instagram post. Following past patterns, whenever Morrison family members were willing to mention me on social media platforms, regardless of the content, I would always respond. I would delude myself into believing this represented the beginning of being truly acknowledged. However, this time, Austin Morrison was in for a surprise. He only realized I had not responded to his Instagram post a full week later, and only because Austin Morrison and his group of friends had started a betting pool. Austin Morrison was the first to place a bet, wagering that I would reappear within 10 minutes, pathetically begging them to let me return. When he discussed me, his supposed older sister, with his friends, he said, "How could Taylor Morrison possibly give up the Morrison family wealth? She's nothing more than a dog kept by the Morrison family. I absolutely refuse to acknowledge such a person as my sister." It was only when his friends reminded him that he seemed to have lost the bet that Austin Morrison suddenly discovered I had left no trace whatsoever on his Instagram post. Taylor Morrison appeared to have truly vanished from this world. Austin Morrison sent me exploratory messages only to discover that my account had been deactivated. Not just Instagram, but my phone number and Facebook as well. On every social media platform he could think of, everything showed a deactivated status. Austin Morrison began to panic. During the days when he had defiantly left home with Brooke, she had frequently tearfully told him about the various schemes I had supposedly orchestrated from abroad. Using the same old tactics, Brooke claimed I regularly sent her threatening messages late at night, demanding money and threatening to expose her adopted daughter's status publicly. Taylor says that since she's already abroad where you can't control her and Dad gave her so much money, if she can't come back, then I shouldn't expect to have a good life either, Brooke said, tears welling in her eyes while looking at Austin Morrison with extraordinary consideration. What isn't mine, I would never take. But Austin, if you could somehow persuade Taylor, she's become so extreme now, always demanding $50,000 at a time. I really don't know what she needs so much money for, and I'm genuinely afraid she might go down the wrong path. With just a few sentences, she calmed the guilt that had been rising in Austin Morrison's heart toward me. He remembered how I had looked after being accused of harming Brooke, with that stubborn expression of someone who refused to admit wrongdoing. So that evening, Austin Morrison posted a public announcement on Instagram, declaring to everyone that I was merely an orphan the Morrison family had charitably taken in, while Brooke was Austin Morrison's only real sister. Since these words came from the Morrison family's own son, they had to be believed. The whispers within social circles questioning Brooke's identity were finally silenced. My nominal fiancé, Derek Ashford's parents, also finally relented, allowing Brooke and Derek Ashford to grow closer. The previous generation of the Ashford family had been thrown into chaos by a baby-switching incident, so the current Ashford family placed extraordinary importance on bloodline. Derek Ashford had previously proposed engagement to Brooke, but rumors about Brooke being adopted rather than my twin sister had been circulating persistently. My identity and Brooke's had never been clearly distinguished, but now everything was developing in Brooke's desired direction. The prerequisite was that this was all based on my supposed death. But if I were dead, then who had been threatening and intimidating Brooke these past few days? Austin Morrison broke into a cold sweat. For the first time, he became lost in his own thoughts, ignoring Brooke beside him, until she cheerfully invited him to attend the fireworks evening Derek Ashford was hosting for her. Looking at Brooke's smiling face, which appeared as gentle as always, Austin Morrison experienced doubt for the first time. However, in the Morrison household, he and Brooke had always maintained the closest relationship from childhood. He was unwilling to suspect Brooke, so he could only force a stiff smile and find a random excuse to leave the lakefront apartment he had purchased for Brooke with his entire year's allowance. He wanted to investigate the truth. This ordinarily proud young man now seemed almost to be fleeing in panic. As he left, he encountered Derek Ashford, who had come to pick up Brooke for their date. Austin Morrison had previously admired Derek Ashford greatly, believing him to be someone who dared to rebel, thinking Derek Ashford possessed the same rebellious spirit beneath his gentle exterior. This manifested in Derek Ashford's determination to endure family pressure and choose to be with Brooke after realizing he did not love me. Actually, there had been a period when Derek Ashford and I had maintained a decent relationship. As my nominal fiancé, he naturally protected me in his actions. At his most devoted, even when facing criticism from my own family members, Derek Ashford would firmly tell me, "No matter how the outside world judges you, I only trust my heart. Taylor, you're not a bad person." However, this Derek Ashford, who had believed in me so wholeheartedly, eventually chose to stand by Brooke's side. Perhaps he felt guilty, as many internet users called him a scoundrel. Derek Ashford accepted all such criticism, but Austin Morrison did not see it that way. In his view, when choosing between the gentle and kind Brooke and the vain and malicious me, anyone would know how to choose. He believed Derek Ashford was simply courageous enough to follow his heart. Until now, looking at Derek Ashford's gentle and warm face, he could not help but feel suspicious. In everything that had transpired, was Derek Ashford somehow involved? Finally, he came to inquire with my best friend, Paige Sullivan. Did Taylor Morrison really do all those things? Has she contacted you recently? Why hasn't she called home? Austin Morrison's voice trembled as he spoke these words. At this point, Paige Sullivan laughed so hard over the phone that she could barely catch her breath. This was the first time Austin Morrison had come begging to her, solely to confirm whether I was alive or dead. He said, "Please tell me, this is very important to me." Naturally, Paige Sullivan would not give him any courtesy. She replied, "Can't you read the news yourself? The skiing accident had 73 victims with no survivors. Besides, didn't you install a GPS tracking device on her? Just check it and you'll know." Memories of the GPS tracking device I had worn came flooding back. Austin Morrison had actually installed that GPS tracker on me in front of the entire school faculty and student body. Although he knew Richard Morrison had already disciplined me into submission rather than the stated reason of fearing I might harm Brooke, Austin Morrison simply wanted to humiliate me. He wanted to tell everyone that Taylor Morrison was an ungrateful wretch who, despite being raised in the Morrison family, was jealous of the perfect and kind Brooke and repeatedly framed her. He wanted to defend Brooke's honor, and he succeeded. Throughout my 3 high school years, except for Paige Sullivan, daughter of an entertainment industry magnate, I made no other friends. No one dared to question Paige Sullivan's decisions, but that did not prevent them from looking down on me privately. After all, I was someone so despised by my own parents and brother that they needed to install a GPS tracking device to monitor me specifically. I would never be worthy of comparison with Brooke, who only needed to stand there flawlessly to be protected. Now, the GPS tracking device that had once been used to humiliate me became the only method for Austin Morrison to resolve his inner doubts. That boy checked it immediately and went back looking like he had lost his soul, Paige grumbled over the phone. That guy has no manners at all, asking questions without even saying thank you. Paige also told me what happened next over the phone. Austin Morrison had wanted to immediately find Richard Morrison when he returned home, but Richard Morrison was not there. At that hour, the only people home besides the housekeeper were Lisa Morrison. When Austin Morrison returned home, Lisa Morrison was scrolling through news on her phone. Seeing Austin Morrison arrive, she called him over to look together. The screen showed paparazzi photos of Brooke and Derek Ashford on a date. The headline read, "The only heiress of the Morrison family and the Ashford heir make a perfect match." In the image, Brooke had carefully chosen her angle, displaying her exquisite makeup and outfit to the camera. Scrolling down a few more pages revealed news about me. Also, paparazzi shots. The photos showed a disheveled woman who looked 90% like me, though her face was unclear, holding a bottle of alcohol. The commentary was quite sharp. Former Morrison family adopted daughter fails in competition with sister for favor, sent abroad, recently photographed drinking on streets. According to insider rumors, this woman refuses to give up, recently sending threatening messages to Morrison family's real daughter, claiming she will drag everyone down with her. Reading this, Lisa Morrison's smile faded. "How disgusting," was her comment. "Some people are rotten to the core and can never change in this lifetime." Austin Morrison wanted to say something, but Brooke's sudden entrance interrupted his words. "Mother, Austin," Brooke said, her face streaked with tears, appearing like a small white flower battered by rain in the wind, fragile and helpless. She said, "Just now, Taylor called me. She said she's planning to return and wants to fight me to the death." She spoke while sobbing, tears blurring her vision so much that she could not see Austin Morrison's suddenly changed expression clearly. Taylor said she saw the news about Derek and my engagement. She cursed me over the phone, saying I stole her life. Since Daddy and Mommy don't love her and only love me, even if she goes to hell, she will definitely take me with her. Mother, I'm so scared. As she spoke, she moved to nestle into Lisa Morrison's embrace, but was pulled away by a strong hand the next second. Austin Morrison gripped Brooke's slender wrist, his eyes flashing coldly as they met Brooke's bewildered gaze. Word by word, he asked, "Are you certain these words came from Taylor Morrison?" Brooke seemed confused, thinking Austin Morrison was angry on her behalf, so her voice became even more pitiful. "It was Taylor. I've been her sister for 8 years. How could I not recognize her voice? But Austin, please don't blame Taylor. She's just temporarily blinded by jealousy and can't see that you all love her too. That's why she's being extreme. You mustn't—" "Ah, Austin, you're hurting me." However, the usually obedient younger brother did not release his grip upon hearing this. Lisa Morrison anxiously began hitting him with her hands. "Are you crazy, Austin Morrison? That ungrateful Taylor Morrison did something wrong, so why are you taking it out on your sister?" But Austin Morrison seemed to have sunk into another world. After a long moment, he finally found his voice. He said, "But Taylor Morrison died abroad 10 days ago." This single sentence left everyone stunned. Lisa Morrison was the first to react. She had never liked me, feeling that during my time wandering outside, I had learned bad habits and become incorrigibly depraved. However, when she heard Austin Morrison say I was dead, she was the first to express anger. "Austin Morrison, how can you curse your sister like that?" Brooke also reacted at this moment. Her eyes darted toward Austin Morrison, her smile somewhat stiff. "Austin, what are you saying? Did Taylor trick you again? You know this isn't the first time she's told such lies." Before Austin Morrison could speak, Lisa Morrison had already taken over. "That's right. Taylor Morrison has always been a pathological liar. This time she actually fooled even you. Didn't you just see the news? She's still living it up abroad, drunk and debauched." Lisa Morrison spoke with a light snort, her tone containing extreme contempt for me. Her daughter. How strange. Hearing that I was dead made her angry, yet she looked down on me when I was alive. Not only did I find this strange, but Austin Morrison found it peculiar as well. Looking at the two people before him, his expression became grotesquely comical. Perhaps by this moment, no matter how unwilling he was to admit it, he had to accept the truth. The person who had been constantly lying to them all along was not me, but Brooke, whom he had always considered the most pure and innocent. Seeing Austin Morrison lower his head and remain silent, Lisa Morrison became anxious. "Austin, say something. You don't really believe Taylor Morrison's nonsense, do you?" She reached out and gently pushed Austin Morrison. The normally tall and upright young man's posture gradually became somewhat hunched under her pushing. When he spoke again, his voice was already choked with tears. "Taylor Morrison is dead. I checked the GPS tracking. Her last location was at that skiing resort that had the accident 10 days ago. Foreign news has already reported it. 73 people, no survivors." The young man's voice was hoarse, exploding like thunder in the room. For a moment, Lisa Morrison seemed unable to accept the information in his words. She swayed twice and fell backward, with Austin Morrison catching her just in time. "How is that possible?" Lisa Morrison's expression was somewhat dazed, murmuring continuously. "But the news just said, didn't it say—" "Mom, the news was fake," Austin Morrison said, his voice also growing heavy. He suddenly turned around, and when he looked at Brooke beside him, his eyes no longer held their former reverence and worship. "So, Sister Brooke, please tell me how a person who has been dead for days could make threatening phone calls to you." His voice was cold as ice, frighteningly so. As early as when Austin Morrison announced my death, all color had drained from Brooke's face. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, she now trembled uncontrollably. Meeting Austin Morrison's sharp gaze, Brooke gradually reddened her eyes, attempting to evoke his pity as she had done countless times before. She said, "Maybe I heard wrong. I was just concerned about Taylor and got anxious for a moment. Austin, are you now suspecting me because of Taylor? Am I such a terrible person in your heart? You've always been wonderful in my heart, and it's precisely because of this goodness that I'm in such pain now," Austin Morrison said, looking at Brooke with disappointment. "Just now, I still held on to a last shred of hope for you. If you had voluntarily admitted that you've been framing Taylor Morrison these past few days, I would have forgiven you, Sister Brooke, but you didn't." As he spoke, Austin Morrison stepped back and illuminated his phone screen, displaying evidence of Brooke bribing paparazzi to spread rumors and slander me. "How do you have this?" Brooke's lips trembled, tears flowing from her eyes. Her voice sounded so aggrieved. "Austin, how could you investigate me privately?" She spoke while turning her seeking gaze toward Lisa Morrison. In the past, whenever this happened, no matter what occurred, as long as she looked at Lisa Morrison this way, Lisa Morrison would have already stepped forward to hold her lovingly. However, now the usually elegant and composed woman seemed to have lost her soul. Since hearing the news of my death, she had remained in this state, never recovering. Watching this drama through surveillance, I could not help but click my tongue in amazement while finishing another steak. Seeing that no one could help her anymore, facing Austin Morrison's relentless pressure, Brooke suddenly seemed to break down. "Taylor Morrison is lying. Why won't any of you believe me? If she really died, someone should have contacted us. Dad or Mom, at least one of them should have received information. Because she didn't want us anymore," Austin Morrison suddenly roared. "Before she left, she deactivated all her personal information. She didn't care about her Morrison family identity. Even if we wanted to claim her body now, we have no proof or evidence. Do you understand, Brooke?" He spoke while stepping forward 2 paces, his hands gripping Brooke's shoulders and shaking her violently. "You always used to hint that Taylor Morrison coveted the Morrison family wealth, but when she left, she never intended to return. Tell me, who is the person truly greedy for Morrison family wealth, Brooke?" Brooke said nothing more. She seemed terrified by Austin Morrison's hysterical appearance. Austin Morrison's expression slowly became desperate. He just looked at Brooke like this, and finally turned and went to his room, leaving behind only one sentence: "I truly regret this." When Richard Morrison returned home, he found only Brooke sitting in the living room crying. Actually, Richard Morrison was the first person to realize Brooke was lying. However, to maintain surface harmony, he chose to let the matter rest. Until now, when the conflict finally exploded. Richard Morrison wanted to ease the relationship between them, but from that day forward, Austin Morrison began discovering the things I had left in the house. He became increasingly unable to forgive Brooke and wanted to apologize to me, but could find no way to do so. Finally, he brought Brooke to find Paige Sullivan, but Paige refused to see them. "Acting like he bears no responsibility for this whole mess, just deceiving himself," Paige said over the phone, making retching sounds at the air before quickly continuing. "Are you coming back for the Morrison family memorial service?" This question really got to me. I told her I currently had no valid identification and could not return. Paige said her family had a private jet, and she would handle everything. I wanted to say more, but she said, "Think about it. How many opportunities does a person have in life to attend their own memorial service? Wouldn't it be a pity to miss it?" I was ultimately persuaded by Paige. The young heiress arranged a temporary new identity for me, and I appeared at my own memorial service wearing a baseball cap and mask, deliberately hunching my posture. When Paige Sullivan led me past conspicuously, the Morrison family members were crying bitterly before my portrait, with no one noticing me. They were deeply emotional when reminiscing about me in front of my photograph, yet when I stood before them, they could not recognize me at all. Especially Lisa Morrison, this mother who had previously looked down on me, now appeared to have cried intensely. The woman who had always been concerned with her appearance now looked haggard and weak, requiring constant support from the housekeeper to barely stand. When I passed by, Austin Morrison was arguing with Brooke, or rather, Austin Morrison was unilaterally berating Brooke. A thick stack of photographs was thrown in her face. Austin Morrison looked at Brooke and spoke word by word. "You said Taylor Morrison found people at school to bully you, but what are these?" Those people who had told Austin Morrison they had been sent by me to teach Brooke a lesson were shown in photographs, shopping arm in arm with Brooke, intimate and laughing together. Brooke's pupils trembled upon seeing this, but she only bit her lip without responding. I sat on the second floor, listening to Austin Morrison's hoarse questioning, and could not help but feel moved. I remembered this incident. These people were Brooke's followers who quickly transferred schools after being dismissed by Brooke, but they had maintained good relationships with her over the years. After all, Brooke constantly wished I would disappear from this world, but she could not dirty her own hands. She always needed some tools who would charge into battle for her in exchange for a few designer bags or luxury clothing items. That time, to capture photographs of them, I followed Brooke for 5 full days and nearly got caught by them. Fortunately, I managed to preserve the evidence. Actually, I had plenty of evidence that could incriminate Brooke, including surveillance footage I had secretly installed at home over the years. Throughout these years, Brooke would periodically perform scenes in front of the entire family of me, deliberately pushing her down, or accusing me of intentionally adding allergens to her food. The methods were old-fashioned but effective. Initially, Morrison family parents would pretend to listen to my explanations, but later, they would directly send me to the basement. Lisa Morrison would occasionally speak to me condescendingly, saying nothing more than how much she had expected from me before, and how disappointed she was now. She did not know that I was equally disappointed in them. I knew that even if I held evidence, the Morrison family would not give Brooke any substantial punishment for the sake of family harmony. I had been waiting for the right opportunity. Now that opportunity had clearly arrived. Austin Morrison enumerated the incidents recorded in these photographs one by one. The further he went, the colder his voice became, while Brooke remained silent, only weeping. Finally, Austin Morrison stopped. He pulled out a necklace from his pocket and asked Brooke, "When Taylor Morrison first returned, you said you personally witnessed her stealing Mom's most beloved necklace. This was Mom and Dad's token of love, meaningful to our entire family. But I ask you, why did this necklace appear on Derek Ashford's cousin's neck? Who used it to curry favor with the Ashford family? Do you know that it was precisely because you falsely accused her of stealing that?" Austin Morrison's voice choked with emotion toward the end. The unfinished words were naturally swallowed back. However, I knew what he wanted to say. From when I returned, Richard Morrison and Lisa Morrison had always disliked the lower-class habits I had developed. Initially, faced with Brooke's accusations, the Morrison parents still attempted to correct me. Until this token necklace disappeared, the constantly tense Lisa Morrison finally broke down. I was 11 years old then, and in her extreme anger, Lisa Morrison slapped me hard across the face. She hit me while cursing, tears streaming down her face as she looked at me, the first shame in her perfect, flawless life, sobbing uncontrollably. "Why can't you change? Why won't you learn to be good? What do we have to do? How can my biological daughter be a thief?" It was a very heavy slap that sent my entire body sideways, with a ringing in my ears that lasted for a long time. When I came to my senses, I had already been thrown into the basement. That was also my first time in the basement. 3 days later, when I emerged, I saw Austin Morrison looking at me with extreme hatred for the first time, though he had previously been relatively friendly toward me. Later, I learned that Austin Morrison's favorite golden retriever had gone missing 3 days earlier. The housekeeper said I had released the dog. Austin Morrison later found it in the city's outskirts, but it had already been killed with its skull crushed, dying alone in the desolate wilderness. So the dog incident was also your doing, wasn't it? This time, it was not a questioning tone, but a statement of certainty. Upon hearing this, Brooke's shoulders trembled, her voice extremely aggrieved. Austin, I know I did some things wrong, and I apologize to you. But you can't take out your anger by pinning everything she did on me. This was clearly a crude denial, yet Brooke appeared so utterly sincere. Several onlooking guests had already begun whispering quietly. The Morrison family's young master is really confused, tormenting his own sister like this for a dead adopted sister. How strange. Indeed, until now, Brooke's identity remained that of the Morrison family's biological daughter, while the name Taylor Morrison was still just an orphan charitably adopted by the kind Morrison family at age 10. I could roughly guess this was probably Richard Morrison's intention. He neither wanted to lose the marriage alliance with the Ashford family, nor wanted Austin Morrison to remain angry. Thus, this memorial service came about. This was a very sick family who seemed only capable of uniting to hate others rather than naturally loving each other deeply. So in the past, I knelt, and now it was Brooke's turn to kneel here. Perhaps she also understood that no matter how much the Morrison parents had doted on her before, the future inheritor of the Morrison family was Austin Morrison, who now harbored deep resentment toward her. Marrying into the Ashford family was her only path forward, and Derek Ashford's wife could not be a fraudster with a criminal record. Almost instantly making her decision, facing the furious Austin Morrison before her, Brooke quickly raised her head, tears instantly filling her eyes. She said, "Austin, I know you regret not treating Taylor well when she was alive. Now you want to vent your anger. As long as you can be happy, taking revenge on me is fine. Your sister is willing." When she said this, her voice trembled, yet her expression was so determined. The surrounding guests quieted down. Brooke was publicly recognized as pure and kind, already having quite a few admirers. At this moment, those protective suitors could not help but angrily shout at Austin Morrison. Austin Morrison, being a beast yourself is one thing, but what kind of man bullies his sister? Exactly. Everyone knows it was you, Austin Morrison, who bullied Taylor Morrison most severely. You personally said she was nothing more than a dog kept by the Morrison family. Someone even stepped forward to help Brooke, wanting to take her away. However, Brooke directly refused. She first cast a careful glance toward Austin Morrison, then gratefully said to everyone, "Thank you all for your kindness, but Austin is my brother after all. If he has done wrong, I as his sister also bear responsibility. I cannot abandon him at this time." She wanted to say more but was interrupted by Austin Morrison. "Have you said enough?" Austin Morrison seemed infuriated by her, his fists clenched at his sides with veins bulging. Brooke pretended not to understand, only looking at him timidly. The next second, she was kicked to the ground by Richard Morrison. "Dad, Daddy." This time, Brooke was genuinely in pain, her voice trembling. "Brooke, as an older sister, is this how you smear your brother's reputation in public?" Richard Morrison's tone was light, but his gaze toward her was icy cold. Brooke's lips moved as if she wanted to say something. Lisa Morrison, who had been resting with her eyes closed, opened them at this moment. She slowly walked to Brooke's side, crouched down, reached out to smooth her disheveled hair, and sighed as she spoke. "Little Brooke, Mom and Dad have treated you like a precious pearl." Upon hearing this, Brooke's face instantly drained of all color, as if she had thought of something. She lowered her head and dared not say another word. Paige Sullivan beside me provided timely commentary. I bet $2 she's definitely not convinced. It was a sure thing. Who would bet with her? I ignored her and mixed into the crowd, finding the right moment to fan the flames with a comment. Why are you hitting a young woman? You're really bullying her. With someone taking the lead, those young people instantly became indignant, denouncing Richard Morrison and Lisa Morrison. Only Austin Morrison immediately looked up in this direction upon hearing my voice. I had already left under cover of others, while downstairs, the voices defending Brooke grew louder. Uncle, Aunt, you can't be so biased. Today it's clearly Austin Morrison causing trouble. Exactly. We've all witnessed what a gentle and kind girl Brooke is. Austin Morrison made his own mistakes, but came to pressure a girl. He must apologize to Brooke today. Talking about making Brooke confess and atone, I think it's Austin Morrison who's psychologically disturbed. He has to bully one of the sisters in the family or he can't survive. The loudest shouters in the crowd were actually several guys who usually had the closest relationships with Austin Morrison. Austin Morrison just watched them comment on him, his expression dark and unreadable, the taste of being betrayed by those closest to him. Austin Morrison was now experiencing it firsthand. However, Brooke was genuinely frightened now. She trembled as she tried to speak up to stop these people, but heard Austin Morrison laugh coldly. He said, "So these framing tactics are actually so obviously clumsy, yet I couldn't see through them then, so you can't feel this malice unless you're standing in this position." He laughed until tears appeared in his eyes, looking at Brooke with bloodshot eyes. "I actually hurt her for someone like you. I was actually so foolish, being used to harm my—" "Austin!" Richard Morrison's stern rebuke interrupted Austin Morrison's next words, seeing that the situation was about to develop in an uncontrollable direction. "Austin, what are you doing?" It was Derek Ashford arriving hurriedly. He protected Brooke behind him, then stepped forward and punched Austin Morrison in the face. "If you don't know how to respect your own sister, let me teach you." "Derek Ashford, what kind of good person are you to manage me?" This time, Austin Morrison charged at him with reddened eyes. "Respect my sister, Derek Ashford. Did you ever respect her?" Austin Morrison roared while landing increasingly vicious punches. Derek Ashford, who had initially wanted to fight back, stopped his movements after hearing these words. Brooke took the opportunity to pull him away, seeing that staying at the Morrison family was no longer viable. Before leaving, she spoke to the Morrison parents. "Don't forget what you promised me." Austin Morrison wanted to pursue them, but was stopped by Richard Morrison from behind. "How long do you want to cause trouble? She is your sister, after all." "Sister?" Austin Morrison savored these two words, finally laughing aloud. He looked at all the people present, then at Richard Morrison, coldly saying, "She better truly be my sister." I do not know if it was my imagination, but I felt Austin Morrison's gaze paused on me for a moment. Finally, he fixed his gaze on the large black and white photograph in the center of the hall, choking as he spoke. "I'm sorry, Taylor Morrison. If I had been more patient in understanding you back then, would the outcome be different now?" Austin Morrison left, carrying overwhelming dejection and loss. Paige Sullivan and I watched such a performance, finishing 3 bags of popcorn. As we were leaving, she deliberately slowed her pace, walking among the last group of guests. Finally, before departing, she heard Lisa Morrison's voice as hoped. At that moment, she was speaking to Richard Morrison in a bitter tone. "Where do you get off being a father?" The sound of high heels came from behind. When passing by me, Lisa Morrison suddenly paused, but ultimately said nothing and left directly.